Wild card weekend is finally here, and with it comes a variety of very fun daily fantasy football slates to play over on FanDuel.com. The 2-game Saturday slate, 3-gamer on Sunday, got the single-game slate Monday, and of course, various iterations across all of those as well. We're going to break down most of those various slates today, going game by game, breaking down our thoughts on them from a DFS perspective and letting you know which players we think you should build around for this week. This is the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and FanDuel Research. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a managing editor of digital media for FanDuel Research, joined here as always by Brandon Gdula. Check him out on Twitter at Gdula13. He is a senior managing editor for FanDuel Research, and Brandon, the playoffs are here. How you doing today?
Good. I'd be doing better though if you listed out every slate and every iteration of like what was
Sunday to Monday. Single game for Texans versus Browns. Single game for Chiefs versus Dolphins.
No love for the Sunday night football, Monday night football slate, man.
I like that during the season. I don't know if I'll get there this week. I would like to, but we'll see.
Hey, you can make it happen. I believe in you. Just like on the golf show this week when we talked about getting everyone listening to believe in themselves. I believe in you, Jim.
But should you? That's the better question. And hopefully we'll give you the insights you need to do all those individual slates the way that you want to. Because we're going to go game by game, break down our thoughts on all 6 of these games across Wildcard Weekend to let you know our thoughts on them from matchup perspective and which players we think may be undervalued in the DFS marketplace right now. But first, a reminder to make sure you're subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. Brandon alluded to our betting or our PGA podcast that is now a hybrid betting and a daily fantasy show. So if you are a golf bettor, we're going to be talking about our favorite bets each week on Tuesday on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed, along with still discussing our favorite DFS plays over on FanDuel as well. That's every Tuesday afternoon on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed, and now also on FanDuel TV Plus as well. We, of course, love the Daily ISO with Tom Vecchio, Heat Check for UFC with Austin Swaim, all right here in the same feed. And, of course, the NFL show does continue through the Super Bowl here on Thursdays, 10 a.m. Eastern, live on the FanDuel YouTube page and up on the DFS feed. And, of course, FanDuel TV Plus after the fact. If you like what you hear, give us a thumbs up on YouTube or a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or over on Spotify. When it comes to the NFL playoffs, you've got one game to win at a time. But if you bet, though, I can't read. But when you bet the NFL playoffs on FanDuel, one game can mean a lot of wins. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, has all your favorite bets like the money line and the spread. And there's all sorts of prop bets like quarterback passing yards or who will score the first touchdown. Plus, every day there's an NFL playoff game. FanDuel is giving all customers a no-sweat same-game parlay. That means when you combine all your bets for a chance at a bigger payday, you'll get bonus bets back if your SGP does not win. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. Minimum 3-leg parlay required. Refund issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after receipt. Max refund $5 unless otherwise specified. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit FanDuel.com/RG in Colorado, Iowa, Kentucky, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Tennessee, Virginia, and Vermont. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342 in Arizona. Forgot to say, shout out Vermont. Hello. 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. 1-800-9 in Indiana. 1-800-522-4700. Visit ksgamblinghelp.com in Kansas. 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland, 1-800-GAMBLER.net in West Virginia, and call 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming. Now, we're going to go, as mentioned, game by game, breaking down our thoughts on the various games across this week over at FanDuel Sportsbook and on FanDuel.com. Let's begin things by talking about the first game on Saturday. That is the Browns at the Texans right now at FanDuel Sportsbook. The Browns are 2.5-point favorites. Total in this game is 44.5. Key injuries to note in this game: Amari Cooper didn't practice Tuesday or Wednesday. He missed the past 2 games with a heel injury that was labeled as both due to his heel and due to rest. he said he'll be good to go. And I think that Cooper will be here. Kareem Hunt, sidelined Tuesday, but then limited Wednesday. Hasn't practiced a lot recently, so he'll be good to go. Cedric Tillman didn't practice Tuesday or Wednesday. He is in concussion protocol. And then Noah Brown and Robert Woods both missed week 18. Neither practiced Tuesday. Woods got back to a limited session on Wednesday. Brown was still out, so looking like Noah Brown will not be back this week, while Robert Woods may be. Brandon, let's begin with your overall thoughts on this game. Browns at Texans. What's your overview here of this matchup?
I'm actually going to kick it back to you like quickly because I want to hear your thoughts on something. Because like Jim's got multiple models now. You're new in your old model. You blend them together. I have like my own model, but I don't do as much with it. I'm more like player prop oriented when it comes to the NFL. But the total for this game in my model is really low, and I'm worried that I'm missing something.
What do you have it at?
Like 38.
Okay. I have 41.1. So we're both under.
Yeah.
And I said on Tuesday or Monday when I did the first look at the slate, like if it gets to, because it's 43.5 at the time, I said if it gets to 44.5, then I would be okay taking the under because 44 is a pretty key number. So I think the under is very much the play here right now.
Okay. So that makes me feel better. And it's not to say that there's nothing to like in this game because there obviously is. If you look at the Browns with Joe Flacco, there's a lot to like. Their pass rate over expectation on pass and run plays has been plus 5%. I think it's a top 3 number in that specific split, but basically just one of the higher marks in the league. And they've been running a lot of plays, and that's helped with a lot of the raw stats. I mean, Flacco's averaging just under 44 attempts per game, over 325 yards per game, a lot of touchdowns. But when you do adjust his performance to the opponent level, he is underperforming in terms of EPA per dropback, kind of substantially. I don't want to say it's like, hey, this is the clear place to divest, especially on this 2-game slate, because this game's indoors. This is middling-ish to weak pass defense. So like, I see a path 2 points with this is weird, such a weird sentence. CJ Stroud and Joe Flacco kind of putting up good games against each other. But overall, yeah, I'm kind of like, we've talked in the past about Cleveland's defense on the road, and I think they finished with like the highest points per game allowed on the road. It was like really strange. But my model with is sort of like looks at adjusted success rates, EPA, all that kind of stuff. It said that they're basically slightly better than average road defense. So I think that's kind of fluky. I think that's probably factored in a little bit to the total. So it sounds like we're kind of in general consensus with not loving the over here.
Right.
But what else are you seeing from the Browns here?
Well, I think if we're talking about this in the context of the 2-game slate, I also like the under now for Chiefs Dolphins because the wind went up to 14 miles per hour. I actually have these totals very close, 41.1 for this one, 41.9 for Dolphins Chiefs. So in the context of the 2-game slate, if I've got a similar total, I don't want to like double count, but give me the dome. So I'm okay kind of look in this direction a bit. Looking at that Browns defense you alluded to on the road, if there's no adjustment for matchups, they're at 0.07 passing net expected points per dropback allowed as a defense on the road, and that's league average. But again, you're making adjustments, which is the better way to go. So they have not been as lethal on the road. Now, they played pretty well the first time they faced the Texans, but that game was one of the games CJ Stroud missed with his concussion. So it makes a lot of sense they would play well in that game. So I'm fine just tossing that out entirely. Now, going back to Flacco, as you mentioned, 0.05 passing net expected points per dropback for Flacco, unadjusted for opponent. That's a bit below average, as you alluded to. So I think we'll see some regression as far as efficiency. Like, I don't think they'll keep scoring as many points as they have, is what I'm trying to say there. So if we look at this in terms of the 2-game slate, I was hoping this would be a spot where I could be like, okay, people are going to flock to Amari Cooper coming off a massive game against this very same team. And I thought maybe I can like divest. The problem is his salary is too low. It's $7,500 on FanDuel for this week. And the games that Cooper has been full with Flacco, he has a 29% target share with 58% of the deep work, which is 5 deep targets per game. and a 29% red zone target share. David Njoku, 24% of the overall targets with 29% in the red zone as well. So both these guys have had phenomenal workloads when they've had Flacco. And like the issue is that Njoku's salary is high at 7,000, whereas Cooper is still at 75. So I think even though it's like the most obvious route here, I'm going to wind up being on Cooper quite a bit still, even though I know everyone else will be as well, given what he did against this defense.
Yeah, and look, you can't overthink it. He's indoors. The salary's right. From Flacco, he's been targeted on 29.2% of his routes. Like wide receiver average is a shade under 20%. Once you get around 30%, you're kind of in the elite tier. That's going to continue the opportunities. And whenever you're talking about a 2-game slate, it's hard to ignore volume. And I don't understand how this game finishes with the season on the line where Amari Cooper is just he draws like 3 targets. I don't anticipate that. So I think Cooper very much a standout play on the board. But I mean, David Njoku, 27% target per route rate. That's phenomenal for a tight end. He's got 44%. And end zone targets, they're a small sample, but 44% of them, it seems like, I have some plays burned in my memory already of Flacco just looking for Njoku, it seems like. And there's that one, he threw it to him in the back of the end zone with the defender not looking.
Yeah.
That is in the back of my mind. 7,000 for a tight end on a 2-game slate when, typically when there's fewer and fewer games, value's harder and harder to find. There definitely is upside, but it also kind of just depends on how you view this offense. You mentioned that you think Cleveland will start scoring fewer points. Joe Flacco's already had about 4.7 more touchdowns than he should based on the underlying data in a very small sample. Like the volume's usually there. And again, volume's hard to ignore. Not for quarterback specifically. You need efficiency and touchdowns from quarterbacks, but the volume helps if you can get to 300 plus yards, but more for the pass catchers. So it's hard to look at either Cooper or Njoku and say, no, I'm not really there. Njoku, naturally, the salary is a bit elevated, but do you have any interest in other pass catchers here?
Not in the Browns. Like Cedric Tillman's banged up, which could get some more work for Elijah Moore, but like that concussion was really scary that he had in week 17. I can't get that out of my mind. I know he played a bit last week, but like it's just like I don't know. I'm unsettled by that still. So like I don't really want to personally. I know that like I'll need to find value somewhere, but like I just like even in the games that he's played full with Amari Cooper being full and Flacco being full, it's a 10% target share. Tillman actually has more targets than Elijah Moore in that time. 19% deep target share for Elijah Moore with 12% in the red zone. So, like, I guess I'll probably have to at some. Whoops, I'm not in the right tab. Let's go back over here. I guess I'll probably have to get to Elijah Moore at some point, but like, I don't know. I'm wary.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a almost a minus 15% catch rate over expectation from Flacco. A lot of that came in that first game where he at the time at least had set the single season high for air yards.
Right. And that was again the Cooper left early.
Yeah.
He had some sort of injury against the Rams.
Yeah. So I see the case for it, but again, we're going to need to find value and not just on the 2-game slate, but as we look at maybe the 6-game slate, which is not our primary focus, but if you're playing multi-day slates or something, I think you could do worse than more. And again, it goes back to how high you are on Flacco, how much you think this offensive success continues. The thing I can find, like, kind of say in defense of the Browns here, they are throwing the ball a lot. Their pass rate over expectation is high. Houston's not a great defense. They're 28th in ADOT allowed average depth of target, 29th in yards per target allowed on passes traveling at least 10 yards downfield. There's a clear path to production here. But if the other game on this slate, which is weird to say based on the teams, if there wasn't like the weather concerns, it'd be easier to kind of be down on Flacco. But my final question to you, for
rank them. Rank these
That's
4 quarterbacks for me. Do it now. Let's just rip the Band-Aid off. Do it. It's the worst
um
part of this slate that I can't figure out the most.
yeah. I don't really have a strong like inclination. It's kind of incredible to say that based on the names there. I'm kind of leaning I think I would go Stroud 1.
Okay, I was gonna ask you if that was dumb because that's what I thought too. Like, it's a
Stroud
really good
1.
defense. Even when they're on the road, like, they're still
Yeah.
good. And, like, a lot of you mentioned the points per game total. Some of that was, like, flukiness. Like, that Colts game, I think there were some, like, defensive touchdowns, some special teams touchdowns. There was a lot of, like, weird junk that went down
Yeah.
in those games. So, like, I respect the Browns defense. I have the same numbers you do that show how good they are, but, like, also it's a very good quarterback who is indoors at home and is not dealing with weather. That's double counting the weather. But, like, I think it's for me, it's between Stroud and Mahomes at 1. I think that
Yes.
all 3 of these guys are in the same tier though, including Flacco. Do you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I think 2 is the outlier there in
Yeah, I
the
agree.
negative sense.
Okay.
Even at the salary, I think there's a lot of concerns about like a team going into these conditions as well.
Mhm.
That team's also or Tua in particular has had a lot of like he just had a lack of upside, and they've got we'll get there, but seems like both running backs will be good to go. Sort of my assumption based on the
Yeah,
practice
I agree.
report, they will be fine to run the ball plenty.
Mhm.
So I'm just lowest on Tua, but yeah, it is wild that Flacco is in the tier with Stroud and Mahomes.
Right.
I also could probably be talked into maybe more Flacco lineups than Mahomes due to the conditions.
Sure. Okay. That's fair.
But and it's also weirdly kind of easy, just as easy to stack Flacco. He's got a top receiver and a top tight end, but
Stacko for
yeah, I'm
Flacco.
going
Yeah.
Stroud. I'm
Yeah.
going Stroud number 1. If you kind of try to pinpoint like he's gonna have a lack of targets or at least a lack of healthy targets, but I'm gonna say it. I think like Nico Collins is just a true like wide receiver 1
Yeah.
level. I think that is sure he doesn't have Tank Dell, Noah Brown's up in the air, but Nico is like that guy, and that's helpful. And
Mhm.
honestly, he's got Dalton Schultz. Um, like I think there's enough here to like Stroud. And what I
Yeah.
also kind of saw from Stroud last week is now that everything's on the line, he'll pull it and run it. I mentioned to you on Slack. It kind of reminds me of like Patrick Mahomes, coincidentally on the same slate here, but
Reminds you of
I,
Stroud in college too, where that Georgia game he decided like, hey, Jalen Carter's chasing me down. Maybe I should run. And like
yeah,
that's like I was worried about that too. So it's good you brought that up because like post concussion, I was like, or concussions, it kind of
mhm,
seemed like he had two.
yeah,
I was worried that he wouldn't, but he did 3 for 20 in that Colts game. So yeah.
yeah. I will just point out we're talking Browns defense. They do have a top 10 ADOT allowed, so they kind of mitigate downfield passing. Stroud's had just 2 games against teams who are top 10 in ADOT, under 5 yards per attempt. Poor EPA metrics, but
Which games were those?
those would be,
Was the Jets game in there?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Because that was
I
bad
got
weather. He got hurt.
yeah.
So it was a small sample there, even within a small sample.
Yes,
Um,
yes. But I'm trying to
sure.
find reasons not to have Stroud number 1. I don't
Yeah.
think that's enough.
Yeah.
Again, indoors versus a game that is going to be some of the worst conditions we'll have all year. Uh, I have a hard time not putting CJ Stroud number 1.
Dual narratives working in favor of Nico Collins this week. First one is Michigan national champions. Therefore, he benefits. He gets a boost, the national
Mhm.
champion boost for Nico Collins. Also, a Michigan man playing against the state of Ohio. Just saying, dual narratives in favor of Nico Collins for this week. Collins salary 83 is fine given his upside. I would say if I were playing like a cash game on the 2-game slate, I'd prefer Cooper. But like, I don't know how we're going to find 3 receivers here, honestly. I guess in this game. So I'd be okay with both, but I prefer Cooper if it's a cash game. Dalton Schultz, I think, is my favorite tight end across the 2-game slate. $5,900 for a guy who's been getting really good volume And I feel good about that personally with Dalton Schultz in this game. In the 2 games with Stroud back where they've had no Tank Dell, Schultz has a 19% target share. He's been getting some deep work throughout this year. I think people will gravitate towards Collins coming off the huge game. I know that a lot of people had Schultz betting stuff for his incentives last week for some reason, despite the fact they were in a must-win game and they're not going to care about his stupid money. Maybe people are tilted off of that. So I think that Schultz 59 is my favorite tight end. Do like Collins though at 83 as well, just because the upside is so good. I want to talk to you about running backs in this game because I am not really in on the Browns guys. Jerome Ford 7,000 in the games he's played with Flacco has definitely not had like the best role by any means. 11.2 carries, 3.8 targets per game, 61.8 yards. So that's like not really into that. The Texans' rush defense is pretty good, but Devin Singletary checks in at $6,400, 16.7 carries per game as the team's lead back, 86.6 yards per game. That's a 10-game sample. It's a pretty large sample. Is it egregious to say that Devin Singletary is my second favorite play across the entire 2-game slate?
Probably not. Whenever you get a semblance of salary savings on a small slate, that gets boosted up a ton. If you were saying that I think Singletary is the best play over all 6 games or something, I'd find fault with that. But
it's all Sunday if it's if it's the 6-game slate.
Yeah. But no, we've talked a lot about Singletary this season. The role is there. I don't really see myself even in CJ Stroud lineups. I'm gonna have to play Singletary.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And he's getting enough targets.
I'm
that's
there.
Fine. Yeah. What about you at the Browns backs? Am I being too dismissive of Jerome Ford here?
Not necessarily dismissive.
Like if I have one lineup, I can tell you right now he won't be in it. Like
correct.
That's where I'm at.
That salary, yeah.
Yeah.
As someone who I know nobody cares about your season long teams. I was early on adding him, thankfully, but I never even like started him because I never saw enough in the workload. Yeah. And now this team's pass heavy, and his huge game came with multiple receiving touchdowns. I think he's talented, but he's just not a focal point here. The obvious case in his favor is if this is the better game and he is marginally involved, the salary's reasonable.
Right.
He's got some touchdown equity, but yeah, overall I'm not there by default. So I'm glad you're kind of there as well.
Yeah. I think a big part of it is the red zone share. In the games with Flacco, he has a 20% red zone share versus Kareem Hunt at 27%. So he's going to lose out on work to Hunt, which is annoying as well. Any final thoughts for you on this game before we talk about some Chiefs Dolphins stuff?
I was just trying to look up. Cleveland's been pretty fairly pass heavy, I guess, with Flacco in the red zone, but not overly so. But yeah, no, I think we're good. Let's move on.
Okay, well, let's talk now about the second game on the Saturday slate. That is the Dolphins at the Chiefs right now at FanDuel Sportsbook. The Chiefs are 4.5-point favorites. Total in this game is 44.5. Already alluded to the fact that I like the under here because the wind speeds are up to 14 miles per hour for Saturday night. I care more about that than the temperature. Temperature, I guess, could matter, but it's more about the wind for me. 14 miles per hour is a pretty big downgrade when the other game is indoors. Now, again, the total is still higher in this one after accounting for weather for me, but it's not as thrilling as it may seem at first thought. Both Raheem Mostert and Jalen Waddle returned to limited practices for the Dolphins Tuesday. They should be in line to return this week, both limited again Wednesday. She's pretty healthy. Both starting tackles likely back for this game as well. So overall thoughts for you on Chiefs at Dolphins, Brandon?
Don't love the weather. Don't love the Dolphins in cold weather necessarily. That's the kind of thing that sometimes probably gets a little overplayed, but I have enough reasons to sort of be down on Miami in the first place. So I'm more likely to talk myself into it. But yeah, if in the scope of the whole weekend, don't necessarily love this game, which is, again, really strange knowing these two teams. I don't think that this is a situation where I'm saying oh, this game's not going to score more than 30 points total.
Right.
I can see this game erupting. I can see this game playing somewhere in between. I think it's really all over the place. But I think what I want to ask you is, as the narrative king, what do we do with Tyreek Hill?
Oh yeah. Tyreek Hill revenge game here, taking on the Chiefs. Hill, his salary on FanDuel is at $9,400, which is pretty decent, honestly,
Mhm.
relative to where it has been. It's a slate where receiver is not great either, so that's not bad. I think the problem is wind speed. He does get a lot of short targets, which is I think beneficial in this situation. 29% target share in the games he's played with Waddle since their bye week. I chose that sample because Waddle was banged up early on this year, so wanted to get a more healthy look at him, although he's not healthy now. But in that time, 29% target share for Hill, 57% of the deep work, and 39% inside the red zone. Those are amazing target shares. So in a vacuum, I'm into it. The problem is, I know I want to get to Cooper at 75. I like Nico at 83, who also has like legit upside.
Yeah.
And I'm wary of the wind speed in this game. So if we're talking, I get one lineup for the Saturday slate. I think the odds Hill is in it are not super high right now. If you give me three, like a 3 entry kind of thing, I'm probably going to weasel him into one.
Yeah.
But I think that's where I'm at right now. Are you divergent from me on that?
No, pretty much the same as I build out lineups here for the 2 game slate. It's hard to sort of build around him whenever Tua is my 4th ranked quarterback. The
Mhm.
salary allocation, like the salary sort of offsets a little bit um with Tua, so like that's a bit helpful. I will say the Chiefs have sort of just given other teams like a taste of their own medicine, and they're like top 12 and 8 out allowed.
Yeah.
Pretty good against the downfield pass. Seems like it's like, hey, you're gonna do it to us, we'll do it to you. I think for a lot of reasons, the probability of a lot of downfield targets for Hill just goes down, and that's kind of what you are banking on. Now
Yeah.
he can also take anything to the house. I get that, but I'm struggling to sit here and say that I'm going to prioritize him over a pretty like solid running back slate where you have guys
Mm.
with workloads.
Mm.
So
I mentioned before that Devin Singletary is my number 2 guy in the entire slate. Number 1
mhm,
is
yeah,
not no surprise to you, Isaiah Pacheco.
yes,
Pacheco's salary in the slate, $8,000. No jerk McKinnon, obviously, for this game. In the games Pacheco has played without McKinnon, it's a 3-game sample. 59% red zone share for Isaiah Pacheco, 17 carries and 5.3 targets per game. If you look at adjusted opportunities per game, which is carries plus 2x target, and each guy's most relevant sample on this slate, Pacheco is 5.2 per game above everybody else. His yards in scrimmage is almost 40 clear of the field. So is it I'm like, I think he's 100% club this week. For me personally, the Dolphins are a good defense, but they're also a Vic Fangio defense. Fangio defenses smartly prioritize stopping the pass over stopping the rush. Dolphins defense ranks 10th against the pass, 16th against the rush. They've lost pass rushers, but like that also hurts them against the run as well, because like those guys feasibly can play the run too. So I think Pacheco is going to be borderline 100% for me this week. I might go Pacheco Singletary every lineup and then mix it up from there personally. I think that's where I'm leaning. I think Pacheco is also a really good. He's the best play for the 6-game slate from this slate. I think the Sunday running backs are really good. But like I love Pacheco. Am I too high on him?
no, I think you could have basically just said that in week 17 he played 92.5% of the snaps. That's a rate that I could probably try to do this quickly, but there have been minimal games where running backs have played 90% of the snaps this season. It's just
I
not
got you.
something we
I'll pull
see
it up.
anymore. Okay, cool. Um, with that workload, it's clear that this team just believes in Pacheco. They want to have the ball in his hands. Now, like if McKinnon were here, I'd probably still worry, but without him, it's like it's evident that he's their guy and they're going to get him involved in various ways. And he's running routes and he's getting targets. I don't know how you look at that and just sort of downplay it at all. And again, it's scoring could be down here, but if conditions are tough, if wind is up, it's just more reason to think that he'll get carries, he'll get short targets. Pacheco's the best play on the slate.
Pacheco's 92.5% snap rate week 17, the 13th highest mark this year. Most of the guys above him are Kyron Williams or Christian McCaffrey.
Right.
But then there's also 2 of Zach Moss, 1 Saquon Barkley, and 1 Zeke, because of
Yeah.
course, in 2023. So I think Pacheco
Yeah.
is like just the best play.
Yeah, it's rarefied air. I'm not saying he'll definitely play 90% of the snaps this week, but I would not be surprised.
CH was out for that game because he had an illness, but
Yes.
like also like with how effective they were in that game, I think you just ride Pacheco.
Yeah, I would be surprised if they just scale him back a ton. He's just good. So yeah, I'm in on Pacheco. He is my favorite. I think just my overall favorite play, to the point that, like you said, if I'm building under 10 lineups or something, I'll just have him in all of them. If I'm like going, bigger than that, I'm not going to lock him into everything, but process is there for Pacheco.
Yep. Let's talk about the Dolphins backs. Let's assume Raheem Mostert plays, given the 2 limited practices. Sounds like he was kind of close to playing the previous 2 games as well. Mostert's salary is 82. Devon Achane is 74. I think from a like strict process perspective, if we're talking like volume versus salary, I can't get to either. However, I can see the path to either guy being legitimately good, given that we'll probably see a lot of runs in this game. The Chiefs do struggle against the Russ. That they rank 26th there based on numberFire schedule adjusted metrics, and teams do run against them at a decent clip relative to expectation based on how good they've been so far this year. So I think Mostert and Achane fine for tournaments, but like I would say Pacheco and Singletary are great for tournaments. So like they're fine versus great. How do you handle those 2 guys on your end?
Yeah, so basically what we'll talk about a lot throughout the show and throughout the rest of the playoffs, because there's going to be better process plays, like obviously better process plays than other guys, but you got to tell yourself a story of how this game plays out. If you think that Miami just has I would not be surprised if there's a situation where both of these guys make the perfect lineup on the 2-game slate, because they just run the ball over and over and over again and they score touchdowns. Like, that's very feasible. But as a default process, yeah, I'm looking at Pacheco. I'm looking at Singletary. My question to you then is, we're not really there with Ford or Hunt. We're on the fence about these 2-game slate. What are your odds of flexing a running back? Like in your main lineup,
30%.
Because that basically means you're playing one of these guys, unless you just get to Ford.
Yeah. Well, I'd probably just play with one of these guys. I think it's about 30%, most likely.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the pass catchers here on the Chiefs side, and also Jalen Waddle, because we did talk about Tyreek Hill earlier on. Rasheed Rice's salary for this slate is $7,800. Waddle is 68, coming off that injury, but then it jumps all the way down to Justin Watson, 52. Some other guys worth noting, I think Mecole Hardman's salary is 49. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, 48. We're going to slide past Kadarius Toney. And then Richie James is $4,400. What's your view of the non-Tyreek pass catchers here in this game?
I would say, should I start with Waddle then?
Sure.
I'll start with Waddle, because we're going Tyreek. It's been hard to figure him out this year. I don't have the data. I mean, I do have the data. I don't have the data pulled up. It feels like he drops a lot of passes, and that kind of kills things. As someone who's had a lot of interest in him for various reasons, and you don't expect it for someone of his caliber. So I'm sorry if the drop rate does not apply. I think it's more the costly drops, or just that Miami's on red zone a lot, so you see the drops more. But if this team's hard to figure out, week by week samples, just because of players being in or out, or players playing limited snaps. But if you just kind of grab games where their big 4 skill players have played at least 20% of the snaps, I'm not going to look at per game numbers, but per route numbers, like Waddle's still at 2.15 yards per route run, which is a good number. 28.7% target per route rates. Like, when he's been on the field and they've had these guys largely active, like, it's not a question of whether he's going to get targets. I think I need to be higher on Jalen Waddle, is what I'm basically getting to, where The salary's down. The production can definitely be there, but it's not always there. We've had, you know, volatility is a tricky thing with daily fantasy, but volatility with positive outcomes clearly attainable. Uh, it's interesting for the salary. I think Waddle, if I'm building one lineup for this 2-game slate, it's gonna be hard to overlook him
Yeah.
because the salary works out so well. So any interest in Waddle?
Yeah, I want to get a read on sentiment because I do worry about players coming off of legitimate injuries, and Waddle is doing that. But like if like I know
I
going
think
back to
everyone
the
does.
yeah full by Thursday, if we get that, arrows up at 68, like I'm in. If we don't get a full practice Thursday, which honestly I'm betting against full practice Thursday, that's a bit tougher sell. But like Waddle after the bye with Tyreek had a 26% target share, 22% deep. So not a lot of deep work, but that also means they're getting him underneath targets, which is good given the weather in this game. So I would love him at 68 if we get a full practice Thursday. I'm just not expecting that to happen. I'll still like him if we don't, but it's harder to get as enthusiastic here.
So, well, if he's out or limited and you're not totally there, any other Dolphins pass catchers then?
No, they
Or does
don't.
that bump up like Devon Achane and you think he gets more targets?
Maybe, but I think it just bumps down the offense.
Okay.
Like Rashid Rice's salary is $7,800. Travis Kelce at tight end is at 72. Looking at the games they've played since the bye week, excluding week 18, Rashid Rice actually leads with a 25% target share. Kelsey's at 20%. Not a lot of deep work for Rashid Rice, but also it just seems like that's part of the trade-off here. Like it'll be Justin Watson and Marquez Valdez-Scantling getting downfield targets. And like I worry a bit about the upside of the Rice in 78, given that he's not going to get a lot of downfield work. But like he's been productive. You know, he's tied to Patrick Mahomes. We like both those things. So I think this is part of why I prefer Amari Cooper at 75 and prefer Nico Collins. I want the deep work inside. But like
Mhm.
it's hard to like talk down too much of Rashid Rice. So like single lineup will I get there? And I think this is pushing me further towards Stroud, honestly. I don't think I will. I like him, but I don't love him. What about you with Rice? And then talk to me about Kelsey too.
Yeah, same thing. More of a like than a love. Prefer Cooper, prefer Nico. There's like a volume based sort of upside for Rice in a sense,
Yeah.
especially if the wind is up. He could get, I wouldn't be surprised if he replicates that like 12, 9, 10 target kind of
Yeah.
stretch that he's had there that you have pulled up. Uh, but yeah, overall, one lineup not getting there. It's more of a who's my quarterback. If it's Mahomes,
Sure.
obviously I'm
Yes.
going Rice. If it's not, it's probably going to be Stroud or Flacco. That gives me more. So I'm more likely to have Cooper and Nico instead of Rice anyway. But that's like you said, it's not to talk down of Rice,
Yeah.
but I think he is kind of at his sort of at his salary peak in this sense for
Yeah.
all this context.
For right now, at least. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Kelsey, boy, I don't know what to do. I think I just have some FOMO lineups of Kelsey when I stack when I play Mahomes. He's, if you look at games since the bye with Mahomes, Kelsey, Rice, and Pacheco, I have him at a 19% target share. It's only 6.4 per game, 19.5% target per route rate. He just doesn't look healthy.
That's why I'm
And
glad they rested him last week. Is like that doesn't hurt my view of him. I still prefer Schultz over him, but like, I'm receptive to the idea of him as a result of the fact they sat him. If you're spending up Kelsey versus Njoku,
I can't believe that's a question,
I
but it's a
know.
good question. Kelsey is due for touchdown regression.
Mhm. And it wasn't that long ago that he was getting 83, 81, 91 yards.
Yeah.
You know,
I think game theory wise, because I like Cooper so much, and you're gonna have to stack multiple guys on the same team. I think game theory wise, I'm probably going Cooper and Kelsey.
sure.
Like I'm much more likely to do Cooper and Kelsey than Njoku and Rashid Rice.
Would you consider the same lineup? Because they're only $100 off in salary, that 2v2, duping it, making it Njoku plus Rice. I think that would work.
I think yeah, but I would
Okay.
lean Kelsey and Cooper
I think so too.
pretty easily.
I would as well. Okay, let's talk about the Shout out Rich Reed, our ancillary jabronis on the Chiefs. Mecole Hardman, 49. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, 48. Justin Watson, 52. Deep ball is going to be hard to come by. I think that actually gives me some interest in Mecole Hardman. They got him pretty involved last week when he came off of IR. But, like, it's a leap of faith with any of these guys. Like, I think Watson's role will be the best in terms of snap rates. And, like, he does get deep work in the games since they're bye, excluding week 18, 33% deep target share, 11% overall, whereas MVS is at a 7% target share, 21% deep. I don't know, man. Just like
There's
throw it
not
a
a whole,
dartboard.
and that's why any semblance of value for someone like Devin Singletary
Right.
goes such a long way, because
Right.
you're not going to find a lot of great plays. Now, I will say, if you're playing Mahomes and you want to go Kelsey or Rice with another one of these names down here in case there's a touchdown combo, sure. I don't really have a strong inclination based on the route rates. They're all like relatively okay, but nothing phenomenal. And I don't love this game a ton.
Yeah.
That's why someone like, if Waddle's good to go, it's going to be hard to ignore that salary, because, again, it's a semblance of salary savings. I just,
Yeah.
Tim's building a lineup here.
Yeah.
It's got my attention, but
it's got 5,500 left for one slot, and it's like,
it's
I guess
not even
Bobby
it's not even
Trees.
star stuff.
Oh no, I can't. I had to give you 5 Texans. Wow. 5 Texans against the best defense in football. Good lineup, Jim. You moron.
So I mean, you'd probably have to bump off of.
I'd probably bump off of Schultz and go down to like.
It's going to be really
Durham
hard to
Smythe.
flex to. It's going to be really hard to flex to 2 running backs. I'm just going to throw out this name. I know you don't like him much, but Cedric Wilson is 5,000.
No,
I know.
No.
I'm probably more likely to play him than I am guessing on the Chiefs.
Okay, you can do that. That's fine.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts for you on this slate, or should we move on to the Sunday slate?
I think we covered it pretty well. A lot of ways to go, and that's fun.
Let's talk about some more weather then and move on to Sunday and talk about the Steelers at the Bills. We're right now at FanDuel Sportsbook. Bills are 10-point favorites, and the total in this game is 36.5. That is actually up a tick from where it was on Monday because I guess we got some buyback in the over. Over is still just minus 105. I like the over in this game. Honestly, I think there's been bit of an overreaction to weather. Wind speeds here, 22 miles per hour, potentially snow in Buffalo. I get it, but I think that's gone a bit too far personally. Injuries to note here, TJ Watt will not play in this game for the Steelers due to the knee injury he suffered in week 18. Najee Harris didn't practice with a knee injury Wednesday, but that's been his typical regimen recently, so he'll be good to go. Gabe Davis did not practice due to the knee injury he suffered in week 18, though there is still a chance he's able to go in this one. So overall view of Steelers versus Bills, I think the context here is this total is 36.5. Other totals on Sunday are 50.5 and 51.5. So overall thoughts for you on this game?
Yeah, you can easily make a case that this is the differentiation game of the week based on how it stacks up against, the 3-game slate's a big slate on FanDuel, so it's going to get a little bit more of our attention here. But my main fear with this game is slightly weather, but weather combined with how run heavy these teams have been in relevant splits here. The Steelers with Mason Rudolph have a pass rate over expectation of minus 11.8 points. That's pretty clearly the lowest in football in that split. The Falcons finished the year at minus 9.7%, and they were the only team on the full season below 6.5%. This team has basically been able to run the ball and wants to run the ball, milk the clock, take plays away from the other team. There's not many more teams you need to do that from compared to the Bills. And that's led to a lot of opportunities for Najee Harris on a per snap basis. It's wild. But before we get into the player level stuff, the Bills, since their offensive coordinator transition, minus 4.6% pass rate over expectation, still running a lot of plays, but they've been really run heavy. I think this game could just the clock might never stop. And so it's a lot of reasons to like the under. I know you like the over, but is this like a way over or just an over? Because there's a
It's
difference between an over and like a shootout.
So I like the over, but even with that, I still have the total in this game like 6 points lower than the other two games. So
Yeah,
like it's not going to matter for DFS. It's just a
yeah,
betting take because I think the over
yeah.
is the way to play things here. Because I agree with you. I think that we'll see both teams be pretty run heavy. I think they'll be successful in doing so, honestly, given how well the Steelers have run the ball since their bye week. Same thing has happened last year. Like they ran the ball well out after their bye week. Same thing this year, both with Najee and Jalen Warren.
Hmm.
And then same thing on the opposing side with James Cook. So I think it'll be pretty run heavy. I think that like if I could have my like ideal world, I'd love to be contrarian and go Josh Allen on this slate. Salary for Josh Allen is $9,000. It'd be
Hey, buddy,
awesome
you
to be
can do
like,
that.
what?
You can do it. You can do whatever you want.
No, I can't. I want to get
You
to
said
like
it in
I want to get to these guys.
in an ideal world, you could. Hey, as long as it fits in that salary cap, and you don't have more than 4
That's
players on
the
one
issue. Is it's
team.
not going to fit. Like ideal world, like Galaxy brain pivot to Josh Allen before he rushes for 3 touchdowns would be awesome. But like a lot of salary to allocate for a game with such a low total. So will I get Josh Allen in lineups? Yeah, of course. Will he be in like a single lineup I have for Sunday? Like if I have one, nah, probably not. But I do see the case for him more than anything else. As far as this game goes, let's talk about this backs end in the context of the 3-game slate. James Cook's salary at $7,100. We got Najee Harris at 65, Jalen Warren at 56. I think all three are in play, honestly. I don't think I'll need to get down to Warren at 56, given I've got Aaron Jones 7,000. I think that Najee is a pretty good play at 65, but also Warren does have in the 12 games since their bye 72 yards from scrimmage per game. The problem is no red zone work, 22% red zone share for him versus 46% for Najee. So where are you on Cook, Harris, and Warren in the context of a 3-game slate that is really, really good at running back?
Again, it's more salary based for those guys. Like Najee Harris, we can talk about the snap rate. Same for Jalen Warren, but these guys are getting a lot of opportunities on a per snap basis, and so that kind of makes the snap rate misleading because his team is just so run heavy. The question is, if they fall behind, will they remain run heavy? I would kind of think yes to try to narrow the gap. I
Sure.
think that's probably the way that they're going to go, probably the way that they need to go. So I think that Harris and Warren, I'm going to have more of them than I would probably want because I think that the opportunity is going to be there. The case against them in particular is they just don't score any points, and you
Yeah.
need touchdowns. You can get 20 carries and you can have 80 yards, but if your team's not scoring touchdowns, that's sort of the big problem. I think that's possible, but salary itself is, I'll just say the salary for both guys very reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're gonna get a little contrarian, taking a team that's a huge underdog and taking their running backs makes sense. So I'm not as out on them or as low on them as I thought I would be. Am I we talked about the Dolphins 2 backs. It's like there's 2 guys, they split work, don't love it. But I'm
Yeah.
kind of higher on but it's a very different salary. This team is clearly trying to run the ball more than any team in football right now.
Right.
So am I too high even being just like okay with these 2 backs?
No, I think that's fine to be okay with them because I agree with you on the thoughts and their workload. I think the key difference here is looking at the receivers in the 6,000 range. Like Brandon Cooks is there, and he's at home, which is important. Demarcus Robinson is there.
I've never
Like
I don't know the last time I've heard you speak positively on Brandon Cooks.
which is weird because I loved him like when he was
Yeah.
younger, which was 16 years ago. But he's at home. Like that's the only reason I'm here. He's playing indoors. So like I like Brandon Cooks. And the other issue is these 2 names right here. Their proximity to James Cook and Aaron Jones. That's the one kind of downside there. I think Cook and Jones are both standout plays, and they're both pretty close to Najee in salary. James Cook, $7,100. If you look at the more recent games, it's been underwhelming. But if you look at the overall sample since Joe Brady became the offensive coordinator, James Cook is at 15.5 carries, 3.7 targets per game, 104.7 yards in scrimmage per game. He was above 100 in the first 3 games, and he's been bad since then. But red zone share is 26%. That's an improvement from where it was. I think Jones is the better play between the two. But I think the James Cook is probably my number 2 running back play on the slate considering salary. Is that too high?
No, I think it's again goes back to the potential for this game just to be run heavy.
Mhm.
Um, especially if there's no if Gabe Davis is inactive or not 100%. I could again, I worry about this game and you sit down to watch football on Sunday and it's like, oh, the first quarter's over before I even like realized it.
Yeah.
I think this game could happen, but that's good for James Cook in a sense.
Yeah, sure.
So I think it's reasonable to be high on Cook. Uh, might be, I mean, my favorite exposure to the game would be James Cook, but it depends on how heavily you stack these other games and how many players you want even from this game in your
Right.
3-game lineup.
Let's talk about the receivers. Stephon Diggs' salary is $7,700. George Pickens, 66. Deontay Johnson above him at 67. I honestly I think this is the spot where you go underweight on this game is via the receivers, given the way the
Yeah.
weather shakes out. The one guy I could like, the two guys I think that are worth discussing a bit more in depth are Khalil Shakir and Trent Sherfield. If we assume that Gabe Davis can't go, Sherfield's the guy who plays more outside than Shakir does, but also like Shakir's a good football player, and I think that they've kind of realized that. The worry would be if they're in like two tight end sets, is Shakir out there? And I don't know the answer to that
Yeah.
question, honestly. But he played well when Davis got hurt last week. I think that they're in a position where it's hard for them to like forego playmakers, and Shakir is that. Go ahead.
No, I was just I'm in agreement. Like
Yeah.
it's weird because this team's got the most I'll say one of the most explosive quarterbacks. They've got Stephon Diggs. They've got I think James Cook, who's a playmaker, but it's like they feels like they desperately need people to move the ball for them too at the same
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. It's weird. But Shakir's salary is 58. That works. Prefer more of a Sherfield at 49. If I need to get down to Sherfield, like fine, I guess. But prefer Shakir. Tight end, I think Kincaid is pretty solid at $6,000. If you look at the games, that they played since Dawson Knox came back, Kincaid has a 20% target share, 17% the deep work, and 21% inside the red zone. That's pretty good, and that's with Gabe Davis playing. So Kincaid would get a bump there. 6,000 is not like super, super low. But also like I don't think this is like a stellar tight end slate. I prefer Jake Ferguson at 62, but like I'm fine with Kincaid. How about you for him? And then any Pat Fryermuth, or would you rather get hit by a bus? Because I would.
It's tough. I love Fryermuth. He was one of my favorite tight ends to model.
Because you're a Penn State bias, admit it. World's biggest Penn State fan.
Yeah, I love my. That's is it an alma mater if you didn't graduate from a place?
Sure.
I think it technically might be, but
I don't know.
either way, I like Ferguson. I like Kincaid. I think too much to want to prioritize Fryermuth. I don't think I need to get there again. If I'm going with Steelers players, I'm going with one of the running backs.
Yeah, I think that I'm there as well. Okay, let's move on and talk about the. Do you have anything else on this slate, or can I skip?
We can move on to the better game.
Okay, because there are more fun things to discuss, including my favorite game of the entire weekend. That is the Packers at the Cowboys. Right now, the Cowboys are 7.5-point favorites at home. Total in this game is 50.5. Talked about this on Monday, but typically when you see a total this high and a spread that's not like double digits, my model of a hard time keeping up. However, I've got this at 49.5. So actually pretty in line with the market, despite it being a big total for this game, which to me says I should adore this game for DFS, and I do. Injuries in this game, Christian Watson and Romeo Dobbs both limited in practice on Wednesday. Jaden Reed was full, so a full by Wednesday. You love to see that. Dontavian Wicks was not on the injury report after it seemed like he got banged up late in that game last week. A.J. Dillon missed practice with a neck injury that held him out of week number 18. So, Brandon, I adore this game. I like it a bit more than Rams versus Lions. Where are you on this game in the context of the 3-game slate?
Oh, like it a ton. Jaden Reed's a big one, full in practice. We love Jaden Reed. Salary 7,000. He's going to be a bit of a building block in a lot of ways. But there's a lot to like, I think, about the Packers. There's a lot of interesting guys. We have Aaron Jones. I think he's just going to be featured. 81 or 82% snap rate last week. I like AJ Dillon. He seems like a cool guy.
Yeah.
But Aaron Jones should be a featured back in the NFL.
Look at this.
Also 7,000. I mean, yeah, come
20
on.
carries, 100 plus yards in 3 straight games. No
And
touchdowns in any of them, which keeps his salary low. Like,
yes.
I said Pacheco is 100%, like, for the Saturday slate. Jones won't be there because there are more options for the Sunday slate. But, like, if you put Aaron Jones on the Saturday slate, he'd be close to that.
Yeah, and, Jordan Love's got great efficiency playing indoors, and I think it's 4-game sample. 0.13 passing net expected points per dropback over expectation. You would expect that number to be 0 if you played exactly to the opponent. 0.13 per dropback is pretty nice. He's done pretty well against like good defenses too, in terms of expected net expected points. 0.16 there against top 5 defenses. And again, he's got stacking candidates, primarily Jaden Reed. This team is really hard to pinpoint what their relevant games are, but there's no situation where Jaden Reed is not heavily targeted whenever he has a full game. But there's also some others depending on the news we get. So am I too high on like Love in this offense overall? But it sounds like probably not based on talking to you because you love this game too. But
yeah, and like if you compare like Allen and Goff or Allen and Prescott are their own thing because their salaries are high. Yeah. If you compare Jordan Love to Jared Goff and Matthew Stafford, I think I'm taking Love out of that group of like the lower salary quarterbacks, in part because I do think the Packers can cover this spread. I talked about that on Monday as well. I think the plus 7.5 is very fair, and I think they keep this game competitive at least. So I think that Love is the best of the non-high salary quarterbacks this week. Where do you view him compared to Goff and Stafford?
About the same.
Okay.
But I like this game a lot. The case for Stafford and Goff is just sort of an easier pass defense matchup naturally.
Sure.
But Love, I think this game is going to certainly score points. So I think I'm higher on this game in that sense too.
And I think we have seen some leakiness of the Cowboys defense. That Seahawks game comes to mind. Like you can move the ball on them if you're good enough. I think the Packers are good enough right now, which is why I like Love a lot. And I'm into Aaron Jones quite a bit too. Other running back in this game is Rico Dowdle. Tony Pollard, $7,800. That's really high. I want to use players facing the Packers defense, but like, buddy, why is he 78? Like, why?
I hope in a perfect world. I hope that Tony Pollard and Zeke are like friends, but you got to think that Zeke is like doing a lot of like the take your pick of like the pointing memes or whatever, and just be like,
Zeke is in Cancun and he's not watching football for 6 months.
Yeah.
Like he's fine.
But I mean, I'm sure he had to hear for years about Tony Pollard and I like Tony Pollard. I still think he's talented. It just hasn't all lined up. I can't really justify him at 78.
I think that he's well below James Cook and Aaron Jones. I think the question is, I think he's very similar to David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. I think people like
I like Gibbs way more.
I wouldn't say way more. I like him more, but I wouldn't say way more. But like if you look at their most relevant samples, they have an identical number of yards from scrimmage per game for Gibbs and Pollard. Almost identical red zone share, 33.5% for Pollard, 32.7% for Gibbs. Like they're basically the same running back.
I disagree. We'll talk about Gibbs more later.
Okay. But I would put Gibbs above Pollard. So we're in agreement, at least in that regard, if you are that high on Gibbs. Okay, let's move to wide receiver. I mentioned Brandon Cooks before. Let's talk about why, because I feel kind of guilty saying that I like Brandon Cooks. If you look at Brandon Cooks this year, when he has been inside, he is at 1.8 yards per route run. When he's outside, he's at 0.6. So like he's inside $6,500. We know how pass heavy the Cowboys are. His like overall target shares stink. Since the bye, he's at a 14% target share with 27% deep. But like, I think with this game being indoors, $6,500 is fine. It's a little higher than I want it to be, but like, it's fine. How are you viewing Cook 65, Jake Ferguson 62, and then CeeDee Lamb at 10,000 for the Sunday slate?
Yeah, I can't really prioritize Brandon Cooks because as you pulled up his game log, a lot of recent touchdowns that drives up salary, and it's not necessarily always warranted if it's just sort of touchdown dependent. I am always trying to be sensitive to that. The yardage upside, I'm surprised you're okay with him because you would yell at me unless you just cherry pick the 173.
That's exactly what I'm doing. What do you mean?
Okay.
You know me. Come on. You think I wouldn't cherry pick? Come on.
So I'm disappointed that his salary is as high as it is, and it's largely due to the touchdowns. But again, it comes down to the context of the game. This should be one of the better games of the weekend in terms of fantasy points. Definitely a top 2 game on the 3-game slate on Sunday. From that context, from a predictability standpoint, it's obviously not like a guarantee, but the salary's a little bit high.
Yeah.
Then again, it's all about building the right types of lineups together. And if you like Dak and you can't quite get to CeeDee Lamb, or if you like Dak and CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Cooks, Brandon Cooks is definitely on the radar. CeeDee Lamb, of course, is someone that you have to talk about and say, hey, is it a mistake not to try to get to this guy in your absolute first lineup? You want to talk about touchdowns? He's got them in almost every game lately. He's coming off of a 2-touchdown game, but 2, 4, 6 straight games with double-digit targets, including 2 with 17 targets. Obviously indoors, so he gets that bump. He's got single-game target shares of 43%, 26%, 31%, 31%, 46%, and 33%. Again, I like to, you can look at a whole sample, but there aren't games where CeeDee Lamb is factored out. It just doesn't happen. How high are you on Lamb? Is he someone, if you're building one lineup for Sunday, that you want to get to?
So let's view this in the context of other high salary guys in this slate. That is Kyren Williams at 9,000, Amon-Ra St. Brown at 9,000, and Lamb at 10,000. I think that of those guys, considering positional replacement, I'd probably go Lamb 1 as a top priority. Kyren 2 in large part because I like Cook and Jones a lot at lower salaries at running back. And then I would go Amon-Ra 3. And I feel pretty firm putting Amon-Ra St. Brown 3rd of that trio just because of like raw upside those guys possess. So I think that's how I'd view it. Can I get to Lamb? I would really like to. I just need to be realistic. Like if the route to Lamb is using Jordan Love instead of Dak Prescott, I'll do it. I think that's fine by me. I like Dak a lot, but like I'll go Love over Prescott if it allows me to get to Lamb.
Yeah, so there's nothing bad you could say about CeeDee Lamb in terms of the usage, but we also have Jake Ferguson, who, we'll see what the situation is with Sam Laporta. I'm surprised, but it sounds like sounds like it's within the realm of possibility, but I'm sort of anticipating that it's not, which is another reason why Amon-Ra St. Brown could have that volume-based upside. But I'm with you where the predictability of like a 30-point game skews more towards Lamb and Kyren between the three. So I'm with you on that. But Jake Ferguson, if you're just box score scouting, doesn't necessarily look phenomenal, but that consistency with the target numbers, really great. He's like consistently getting single game target shares of 20%. That to me tells me that he's involved in the game plan.
Right.
And at this salary, he's going to be hard not to kind of prioritize on the 3-game slate. So Ferguson, I will easily say my favorite tight end of the Sunday slate.
Yeah.
And it also helps offset some of the salary to get to Dak, or if you're doing a full Cowboys stack with Dak and Lamb, bringing it back with Ferguson, helps a lot.
I agree with that too. And like, I think that from a role expectation perspective, Ferguson and Kincaid are pretty similar, but we always talk about tight end, tying them to the best game environments. And like, that's easily Ferguson here. So agree with your thoughts on him. Let's talk about the Packers pass catchers. Again, it sounds like they'll all be good to go. Jaden Reed, full on Wednesday. Christian Watson, limited. Romeo Dobbs, who cares? Limited. Dontavian Wicks, again, not on the injury report. The problem is they've got all 4 healthy. So, and I don't know the last time that happened before, because like the last time that Watson was healthy is pre-Dontavian Wicks, like proving who he is. And like Reed also hadn't really popped up then. So you just give me your thoughts on the Packers pass catchers, because I need the most guidance there, I think is how I'd phrase it.
Even like Bo Melton's been doing stuff.
Yeah.
Like
maybe their quarterback is good. You know?
Maybe,
Maybe.
maybe that's the case, but maybe a lot of these guys are just better than the expectation. But the one, as we talked about, Jaden Reed, I really want to get to him in my main
Mhm.
lineup on this slate. But as for the rest of them, it does get tricky because there's. Do you want to talk about Reed more?
No, I just wanted to look at
Okay.
his game log and smile.
Jim does that 13 times a day.
Uh-huh. New Curtis Samuel, and I mean that again in the most complimentary fashion you could imagine.
Uh, thanks for that clarification. I mean, like Dontavian Wicks has a really elite target per route rate
Yeah.
number, better than Christian Watson. Like, and target per route rate doesn't necessarily count for overall game plan and stuff, but it does adjust for like when you're on the field, are you getting the ball? Watson himself has probably played a lot where he's been a decoy on purpose, but Wicks is really appealing. He's been really efficient too. 2.76 yards per route run. Leads the team if you exclude Bo Melton, who's at 2.91. But they got guys, and that's why I'm high on like Jordan Love.
Yeah, I agree.
You might miss on which pass catcher scores or something, but with Reed, Wicks, like how high is Wicks for you? Is he someone you would consider plugging in for your overall main lineup on Sunday?
Probably not if I can avoid it.
Okay.
Just because I'm worried. Oh, geez.
Can you avoid it though?
Stupid Jim. I was doing a play-by-play query thing, and I forgot to uncheck the Packers. I was wondering why my thing was so slow. I worry about the snap rate because if I'm Matt LaFleur, I'm playing him over Romeo Dobbs, no questions asked. And you're not
Yeah,
surprised to
that's
hear
fair.
that. But like, I don't know if he'll do that. If you look at Jordan Love's efficiency when targeting these guys, he's at 0.61 passing net expected points per attempt when targeting Wicks, and there's no sacks in there, obviously. So like that's a super inflated number. But Jaden Reed's at 0.41, Dobbs 0.33, Christian Watson 0.05. So like Watson, they're going to play if he's healthy. Although they do tend to ease guys back in, so maybe they just kind of rotate. So I think that Wicks is probably pretty locked into a role, whether it be via Watson being eased in or maybe Dobbs gets a role reduction of some kind. So maybe I should just be there. But I think I'm honestly like, if I'm using Jordan Love, I am not guaranteed to use a receiver or tight end with him. I might just go Aaron Jones. Honestly, I might go naked Love minus, unless you count Jones.
Yeah, I'm going Jaden Reed a lot with Jordan Love.
Right. I'd like to at 7,000. I just know
Yeah.
that like I'm going to be pretty starved for salary on this slate. So
Yeah, it's tricky. That's why you make a good point though with Wicks. We don't know, can't assume that the team is looking at these yards per route rate numbers or that
can't
they're
assume
not
they
just
feel the
gonna.
same way I do about Dobbs.
That's also a thing. I have Dobbs in a dynasty league. I want him to do well, but I know you're the anti Dobbs guy, but yeah, with Wicks, I don't think I would quite get there either on a main lineup. But he's been playing really well, and I think he deserves some attention.
Did want to mention the tight ends here. Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave. Musgrave was back this past week. I think they were easing him in because like this dude actually like broke his kidney, which seems bad. I know broke's not the proper verb there, but Kraft had a 90% snap rate with 26 routes and 3 targets. Musgrave, 15% snap rate, 5 routes and 1 target. I don't know if that'll be sticky because Musgrave is now a week further removed from the kidney injury, but it also was a must-win game. So, and Musgrave was limited in practice with kidney on the injury report, which is just what a great sport. So like I might just probably avoid these two guys. Like it's a nice salary saving. So I'd prefer Kraft if I'm picking one, but I see some volatility in his role too. Any difference for you there?
No, tight end's really rough on this slate, so it's going to be Ferguson and Kincaid a lot.
Okay. Any final thoughts for you on this game, or can we talk some Rams versus Lions?
Let's move on.
It is the revengiest revenge game that is ever revenged. It is the Los Angeles Rams taking on the Detroit Lions right now at FanDuel Sportsbook. Spread in this game is 3 points, and the total is 51.5. Sam Laporta did miss practice on Wednesday due to his knee injury. They said he has an outside shot to play, but outside is not inside, so I doubt he goes. Jameson Williams, though, full in practice and should be good to go. Tyler Higbee limited with a shoulder injury. So, Brandon, mentioned before, my model is a high total for Cowboys versus Packers. It's high here too. I still think the under is the better play, but like 48.8 for a non-big spread is massive. So from a DFS perspective, light them up, baby. That's where I'm at in this game. What about, I prefer the Packers Cowboys by a bit, but that's because I don't know, there's some salary-based things that I like there. But where are you on this one? Overall thoughts here?
What I thought you were going to say is we prefer, or I don't really know where I stand here. I think I prefer Cowboys Packers though, and it's
Yeah.
because it's a 2 QB game. I think
Yeah.
this game, both quarterbacks are very justifiable, but I don't really think I'm going to get to Jared Goff.
Rude.
This team is able to run the ball. They've got 2 good running backs that can move the ball in various ways. I do think that Jahmyr Gibbs, as I mentioned, and this is not to talk like ill of Tony Pollard, but I just really like what I see from Jahmyr Gibbs in terms of his like underlying metrics and opportunities with Gibbs and Montgomery together. Since the breakout and everything, Gibbs is almost at a 60% snap rate. A lot of red zone carries, 48%, 4.6 targets per game, which is a 14% target share, 33% of the red zone opportunities. And if Sam Laporta's out, something tells me Jahmyr Gibbs is going to get some extra targets to sort of help account for that. I would not be astonished if both guys play, the same, play in the backfield on the same snap. Maybe even Gibbs gets flexed out if they really need to kind of make something happen. But Gibbs has not had he's had huge games, as you can see, but it hasn't been for 2 weeks. I don't think that the snap rate or the overall opportunities jump out to anybody, but his ability to get targets is what I think really separates him for me. The salary is very reasonable. It sounds like I'm higher on Gibbs than you. Am I too high on Gibbs?
It might be that I'm higher on Pollard than you. But because I like Gibbs a lot too. I prefer Cook and Jones. Where are you in Gibbs versus Cook?
I think it's Gibbs.
Okay.
I like the game way more.
I'm receptive to that. That's fair. We sometimes talk about, we've seen situations where once a team gets to the postseason, they narrow their backfield distribution where they like ride a certain guy. I don't think we'll see that here because like David Montgomery is playing very well. However, I don't think we need to see it, kind of for the reasons you had mentioned, where Gibbs is getting targets, playing alongside Montgomery. His red zone share is actually good. It's actually a bit better than Montgomery's. Montgomery 26% in 9 games since he came back. Gibbs 32 or 33%. So like that's good too. Very good game, 74. So bumping him up.
If my simulation model likes Gibbs more than any back on this slate in particular,
including Aaron Jones.
Yeah,
I disagree with that, but
well, that's all right.
You can talk me into him over Cook. I think that's fine. I do think though there is a case for David Montgomery in some lineups. If I have one lineup, absolutely not. If I have probably 5 lineups, no. But like if we're talking more than that, like if you assume the Lions kind of go a bit ground heavy in this game, they can do so via Montgomery, and he is at 75.7 yards from scrimmage per game since he came back, which is a pretty good number. 26% red zone share. There are situations in which he winds up being in the perfect lineup. So like I'm not going to use both in the same lineup because they are like, I don't know, that seems kind of weird. But like he's very similar to Gibbs in a lot of ways. So I prefer Gibbs by a wide margin, but like if I make the assumption that the Lions kind of take care of business here, I think that Montgomery would benefit enough to be viable. But again, that's also like, we're talking still 10 to 15% of the lineup. So I'm not super high. Do you think that's too high, or are you okay with that assessment?
What was it again?
10 to 15%?
I like Montgomery fine, and I think in the right context, he makes sense. Detroit is bottom 7 in pass rate over expectation since their bye. And again, that adjusts for all the game context and everything. So I expect a lot of opportunity.
It's not like Michigan, like same state, I know, but like people are like yelling at like JJ McCarthy being like, oh, he doesn't throw a ball. Like, if you have freaking Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, why would you throw? And you can just like obliterate teams into like submission. Like, why would you throw? Like, who
Yeah, I don't know
cares?
why they didn't just hand it to Edwards. Every time he touched the ball, he scored.
It's
On,
because he ran in the back of one of his offensive linemen, one of the long touchdowns. Like, it's very funny to see that happen. It's like, well, this is both a good and bad of a player on a single play, which is a true delight. But I do like Montgomery. Now, Kyren Williams is 9,000. I already listed out that my priorities on this slate are CeeDee Lamb first, followed by Kyren, then Amon-Ra. How do you view Kyren? Are you actively trying to get there if you got a single lineup at 9,000? Because I don't think 9,000 is that bad personally.
It's not that bad. I would say so. Like again, I mentioned that my simulation model is higher on Gibbs than anyone. I personally am higher on Aaron Jones than anyone.
Uh-huh.
But I think for me, it's like Jones and Gibbs. Like I'm absolutely flexing a running back on this slate. I
Oh,
think
yeah,
there's
yeah,
enough
yeah.
options. Like that's not a conversation.
Yeah.
I want to get to Kyren. I think he does separate. You mentioned, when we were talking about Isaiah Pacheco with the 93% snap rate and where that ranked and who was above him. It's like Kyren Williams is up there. His red
Yeah.
zone role is phenomenal. I don't think that's going to go away. And even if Detroit plays some keep away or they play from ahead, Kyren gets targets, he runs routes.
Yeah.
I don't really see the case against Kyren from any perspective.
Yeah.
I think I'm probably going to flex Kyren because they're in the late game.
Yeah. You can switch to Amon-Ra if you're down,
Or yeah,
stuff
you
like
can.
that.
Yeah, so
Yeah. With Kyren, I think the only case against him is matchup, and that's not a good case based on the way that I play DFS typically. Like matchup's going to be like one of the last things I consider, but the Lions are good against the rush, 8th against the rush by numberFire's metrics. So they're a good rush defense, but also we've seen Kyren against other good rush defenses. And like, I don't think the linebacker play for the Lions is like particularly like that great. And like, we can see them kind of play some games. Like, it's fine. It's better than it was last year, but like, against Cleveland, very good rush defense. 88 rushing yards, 24 receiving yards. Against Baltimore, you can get to them a bit with the ground game. We saw the Rams actively trying to do so, 114 yards there. So like matchup won't scare me away. That's the one reason why I'm ranking Aaron Jones and potentially both James Cook and Jahmyr Gibbs above him. But like, if it weren't for the matchup, I would go Williams for sure. But that's also
Wait,
why I'm going Lamb above him from a priority perspective.
are you Pollard over Gibbs still?
No.
Okay.
I said initially that I was not Pollard over Gibbs. I said that I thought I was like I thought that they were in the same tier.
Okay. Well,
but I'm bumping Gibbs up because I think the rationale was good. But don't tell Brandon I said that his rationale was good. Let's talk about the wide receivers in this game because there are a lot of them.
Yeah.
We have got Cooper Kupp at 75. Brandon.
Mm-hmm.
Write it down. I think Cooper Kupp is undersalaried. That's the first time I've said that in the history
You
of my
just
life.
admitted that like I convinced you of something and you like Cooper Kupp. We need to like make sure Jim's okay.
I'll turn the camera towards the kidnappers off screen so you know that I'm actually not okay. I am unwell. I am not happy, not safe, and not healthy.
But yeah, I mean, I know what's not to like about Cooper Kupp in a sense, but if you look at games with Kyren, Kupp, and Puka Nacua, Kupp's at a 27% target share, 2.26 yards per route run. Doesn't get as much of the downfield work as Puka, and I prefer downfield work because it's more bankable than red zone work. But 37% red zone target share for Kupp in this sample, that's hard to ignore at this salary in a game where there should be points. And he's had kind of a slow year, maybe like overall, but he's got those 100-yard games recently. I think that if they were at all keeping him in check, now would be the time to sort of unleash him even more. So at the salary makes a ton of sense. And, Matthew Stafford's been really good in his indoor games. 0.12 passing net expected points per dropback over expectation, 48% success rate. So like, I think this offense moves the ball in various ways. Kupp's going to be part of that. My question to you though is salary could go a long way, 500 in salary. Kupp or Nacua, and if it is Nacua, how disappointed are you if you need to bump down to Kupp to make a lineup work?
So that's a great way to phrase it. It is Nacua. But I'm
Mhm.
not that disappointed if I need the
Yeah.
500. And that's a different deviation from where I've been previously.
Yeah.
But it also was not typically a $500 difference. So like that does help.
Yeah. I got you.
Yeah. Are you on the same page as far as like you prefer Nakua, but you're not that sad if you have to jump down to Cup?
Yeah, I like Nakua a ton. It's easy to like both of them.
Mhm.
They ran out really similarly for me, but again, I red zone targets can come and go. Red zone chances can come and go. Downfield work is very nice.
Mhm.
But you know, Nakua setting the records. I think there's a lot of attention there. That Giants game, he had one really long catch that I'm still tilting about,
You
but
beat me in the bobble hat that day. Why do you care?
is for other reasons, championship
Oh,
related
yeah. Sorry.
reasons. But
Sorry.
like both of these guys, there's also another receiver on this team that we could like
I
in
kind
Demarcus
of don't
Robinson.
hate him.
Okay.
I
This
know
is
typically
this
you've
is
been the
this
DeMarcus Robinson
is
guy.
yeah, that you like Cup and at least are willing to consider Demarcus Robinson is a victory of it's a
Yeah.
like upset of the century.
So if we look at the sample of the Rams with Demarcus Robinson being a starter or playing a lot, at least like a
Yeah.
50% snap rate, I omitted week 14 when Tyler Higbee didn't play. Although I probably could have kept that in because Davis Allen got a lot of work there too. But in that time, 16% target share for Robinson, but 29% of the deep work and 14% in the red zone. He's actually been like good. So like, why would
So
you stop using him?
yeah. So I included week 14 in that sample,
Mhm.
21% target share, 13.9 yard A dot, 40% of the team's air yards, over 7 targets a game. And then one of the weird things that just exists for Demarcus Robinson, we talked about Cooper Cup getting red zone work. End zone targets are even flukier and less common, but he's got 47% of the end zone targets in that span. They throw the ball to him like in the end zone creatively. It's a thing. I think it gives Robinson an extra boost at this salary. We got 3 receivers on this team. We got Kyron. Should we be higher on Matthew Stafford?
That's been the case all year, and Stafford hasn't done a ton to like burn us for
Yeah.
not using him. I think that's my perspective on it. Like he can have good games, but and like you might only need a good game, but I think given there are 2 high total games in the slate, I think the path to like mistake erasing kind of games is easier for Dak and for Jordan Love.
What is the narrative boost we have to give him though?
Well, if we're talking narrative boosts, the person who's actually mad in this game is the opposing quarterback. Like Matthew Stafford still,
Look how mad he looks in that
yeah,
photo.
like Jared Goff just like looks murderous in this picture. Um, I can't even with the narrative. I think that I'm firmly putting myself in the Love over Goff and Stafford discussion. I think I talked myself into Jordan Love too much. I think he's great. I did want to ask you though about another salary saver in this game, Jameson Williams, $5,200. And if I want to get to CeeDee Lamb, I gotta go somewhere. And I don't see a lot of other great salary savers on this slate. Before Williams got hurt in week 17, he had 3 targets for 69 yards. And like the 2 weeks before that, he was getting like his route tree is expanding. And he had 7 and 6 targets in those 2 games. We know he has explosiveness. They'll get him some red zone rush attempts at times. Borderline lock to be in my primary lineup on Sunday. When you consider salary, consider that he got a full practice on Wednesday. I know the paths to destruction here. I've experienced them, but I also don't care. Where are you
I
on
was gonna
Jameson
say
Williams?
what's a route tree, but I don't want to make it sound like I don't want to disparage myself too much for the bit. But I knew you were going to be high on Williams.
Yeah, I'm predictable.
Laporta is vacating roughly a 20% target share. They this team
Their
again.
backup tight ends don't earn targets.
I think Jahmyr Gibbs gets extra targets as a result, but
Fair.
Jameson Williams also is going to get attention. He's getting more involved slowly. Lack of touchdowns. He's a good player. You think he's in play for a single lineup for you?
Not in play, like almost a
Like a
lock.
lock? He does help a lot.
Yeah.
Who else is down here in terms of So
Josh
we got
Reynolds,
like
who got a lot of work last week, but it's because Jared Goff is his best friend. Well, not his best friend, but like he was feeding him work for incentives. So like he's down there. Khalif Raymond's banged up. Didn't practice Wednesday. He's also their punt returner, so that actually could kind of be a downgrade. Raymond is also a guy they get like kind of creative and fun touches. So he's been fun to watch, but there's Tutu. He's been kind of like a bit player ever since Demarcus Robinson took over. So I really do think, and Ben Skronik's basically a fullback. So like, I don't know. I think it's really Williams as a standout in the 5,000 range.
yeah, yeah, unless we get like injury news for the Packers with Bo Melton having
Sure.
like a bigger role.
Sure.
But other than that, yeah, I do think it's Williams, and I think you're right where if you're building one lineup, he really, really deserves to get a long look. Whether you get there or not is one thing, but
Yeah.
I see the case for it, obviously.
700 salary difference. One lineup, are you going Dontavian Wicks? If we assume that Dobbs and Watson play, Dontavian Wicks, who's been more productive in his snaps, or Jameson Williams, who is more of a lock to get snaps and does have some burst as well?
Williams in that
Okay.
situation.
I agree with you there. Tight ends, probably no Laporta in this game. Are you taking swings at, I would say more so James Mitchell because he's more of the pass catching kind of guy? Or are you taking swings at Tyler Higbee? He's got a shoulder injury, but did practice in limited fashion on Wednesday. Or is it really just about Ferguson and Kincaid on this slate?
Yeah, I think it's. Well, Mitchell had a 64% route rate last week.
Mm-hmm. And he is like, he got the target on their second or third 2-point conversion attempt against the Cowboys. It was him in the flat and couldn't bring it in, but like he is more of the pass catcher type guy for them. Brock Wright's kind of a blocker.
I kind of envision a lot of my CD Lamb lineups could benefit from
Sure.
taking a roll of the dice there, but I really got to make sure that I have upside everywhere else if I'm going that route. Or if you just sort of bet against
Sure. It can be a bet
Kincaid,
against them. Yeah, yeah.
like so, yeah, it's a good call out for sure. I think I'll have a non-zero number of Mitchell for sure.
I'm sad that Minnesota legend Shane Gilstra is on IR. Otherwise, we could have given him a run. Tragic. Any final thoughts for you on this game or the Sunday slate?
Like the game, like the slates. Still think I lean toward Cowboys and Packers as my preferred stack due to a lot of flexibility that I can get there, I think.
I agree. Let's finish up here and talk about the Monday game. That is the Eagles at the Buccaneers. Right now, there is no single game slate posted at FanDuel. It will be up, obviously, but we don't have actual salaries to work off of. I think based on years of experience, we can kind of guess what the single game slate salaries will be. We can talk about this from a more holistic perspective. Eagles versus Buccaneers. Right now, FanDuel Sportsbook, Eagles are 3-point favorites. Total in this game is 43.5. 8-mile-per-hour winds right now in Tampa Bay are projected for this game. So not bad by any means, but also not nothing. Key injuries for this game. We don't know the status of Devontae Smith or AJ Brown yet. Devontae Smith did not play week 18. AJ Brown left early with a knee injury. Didn't look great when it happened, but also they said that he was the first guy to greet players as they came off the field from that game. So I have no idea what to read into those injuries. Also, Jalen Hurts' middle finger is superbly effed. So like, I don't know what to think about that either. Talk me through this game because it is easily the hardest one to crack right now.
Yeah, it would be hard even if we had some information, but we just have so little of it to begin with that it makes it really tricky to guess this far out. One thing that we can say for sure is that Philly's reeling, and I just want to point out that it's not really because of their offense.
Yeah.
It'd be a lot easier to sit here and say that if they didn't have all these injuries now, including an injury to your quarterback's throwing hand, a knee injury to one of the most explosive players in the league, a foot injury to one of the better second receivers, if not like the best in
Former
the
Heisman
league.
winner.
Like, it's hard to sit here and say like, hey man, like let's get in on the Eagles. It's a little bit the win-loss record is going to change perception. I still, though, just kind of think that, DeAndre Swift didn't play last week due to illness. I think that Philly's probably going to try to run the ball a ton and just keep, do what they can to minimize disaster,
Yeah.
because their defense also has played really poorly. That's what's leading to
It's awful.
that's what's leading to the losses. Their offense has been fine. Again, I can't sit here and say it's going to be fine based on all the injuries, but would it surprise you if they have a minus 10 pass rate over expectation or something?
A bit because of the matchup. The Bucks have always been a really good rush defense, and that was true this year too. It's just kind of like a staple of Todd Bowles. Fifth against the rush for the Buccaneers versus 22nd against the pass. So they faced a pass on 57% of the early downs that they faced, which is a big number. So if it weren't for the injuries, I would say they'll be pass heavy in this game.
Yeah,
But I think with the injuries considered, I think they might try to. I'm just not sure how successful they'll be in that, which is part of why I think the Bucks could win this game. And the Eagles defense, you're not joking. They're 29th overall by numberFire's metrics, 29th against the rush, 24th against the pass. They began the year really well against the rush, but then just got into a tailspin. So talking about the single game slate, I know again it's not up, but I'm gonna have lineups where I assume that the Bucks win. I want to go in with that assumption, which leads to a bump for Rachaad White. It'll increase my sentiment towards the Bucks defense, honestly, for the single game slate too. So I think that's kind of where I'm coming at it from. Do I make lineups where I'm okay, cool, let's assume that Hurts is actually healthy. Other guys are good to go. That'll boost stuff there, but I think the Bucks are very live to win this game.
Okay, that makes me feel better because that's kind of how I see it as well.
Yeah.
I'm trying to run quickly because I was waiting for salaries and we didn't get them, so I didn't run stuff. But single game simulations for this slate, you mentioned Rachaad White. I have him around 20% likely to be the top scorer.
Okay.
I think that's really appealing, especially with their status as home underdogs by 3 points. Close underdogs, and for someone like White as well, we don't know what his single game salary is going to be. Again, we can kind of estimate, but should be very reasonable, all things considered, as a building block. And his snap rate is really strong. He is probably going to be the focal point because when we talk about quarterback injuries, Baker Mayfield is all sorts of hobbled. They put up 9 points against the Panthers last week. I know Philly should, by game plan, not run the ball. I still think that they might because they might need to a bit to protect Hurts and depending on how injured everyone is in terms of the pass catchers. But Tampa Bay should run the ball. And I think that Rachaad White, very, very appealing MVP play for the single game slate.
Right, because you think about okay, you've got Hurts, AJ Brown potentially, you've got Mike Evans even. There are a lot of MVP considerations. Will the public use White at a clip of 20% or higher? I would say probably under on that number, most likely. So I think that makes him a good leverage play at MVP for the single game slate. If we're talking the Saturday through Monday slate for Rachaad White, that's where I run into a bit more mehness because you get Gibbs, you get Pacheco, you get Kyron Williams, Aaron Jones, James Cook, Devin Singletary. I think White at 77 is not over salary, but he's also not a clear value relative to those guys when you consider the issues the Bucs offense has had. How do you view White when we toss in those other options?
Really strong game theory pivot
Sure.
because we don't know what to expect in this game.
Very fair. Final injury report will be released day of Saturday, but that means it's a lot less time for people to react to the injury report for this game.
Yeah, and injury report is one thing, but still kind of get some vibes pregame, hey, AJ Brown looks or Baker Mayfield looks like he's just hobbling around or something. But that's sort of my best case for going heavy on this game is we don't know, and there's some sort of leverage in the unknown, but I think that's the best case for Rachaad White. That's not to say I think he's a terrible play on the full 6 game slate, but I just game wise, I think there's running backs in games that I expect to be higher scoring. This one could be one of the lower scoring games because, again, while Philly's going to have a hard time running the ball, I do think that they might run the ball a lot. So
I
I
think
think
the
this
one
game
guy
could
who
flow.
benefits from all the injuries is Dallas Goddard. We've seen this situation with Philly where if they're missing one of their big three, the other two are like amazing for DFS. So I would be aggressive with the guys who are active for the Eagles if we assume one of them is out. And honestly, Goddard's the only one who's healthy right now. So I think you can be on Goddard regardless. But like what I would say is when we get injury news from this game, if only two of the three are playing, be aggressive with those two. It's tougher if it's AJ Brown 82, just because that salary is kind of high. But like with Goddard specifically at 61, like that could be my one route to like getting access to this game would be like via Goddard at 61.
Yeah, Tampa Bay tends to funnel targets as well to tight ends, but I mean, you make a good point where Philly doesn't involve. I know Julio Jones had the 2 touchdown game, but it's not like someone else is like slotting into a 90%.
Julio revenge game. I know that people have no memory of him playing for the Buccaneers, but I promise you it happened. Actually, his headshot is still from the Buccaneers. That makes it even better.
We got a lot of revenge games this week.
I know.
But
Julio's number one. Again, Julio against the Bucs is the number one revenge game. Forget Jared Goff, Matthew Stafford, Tyreek Hill. Like those guys don't matter. Those jabronis compared to Julio Jones against the Bucs.
But yeah, with Goddard, in all seriousness, Tampa Bay funnels targets to the tight end position, and nobody else really steps up into bigger roles with one of these three guys hurt. It just kind of doesn't work that way. So Goddard's probably the most likely play for me on the 6-game slate from this game.
I agree with that wholeheartedly.
And that's with the caveat that I don't know how Jalen Hurts is going to be throwing the ball.
That's the issue is if we had full Hurts, then I'd be like very into Goddard. But even with Hurts banged up and kind of an unknown, I still feel like Goddard is on par with Kincaid, Ferguson in that 6,000 range. Yeah, I think those are like the primary guys who are like there. Also, Dalton Schultz, I think, is in play for the full 6-game slate too. But Goddard's at least in that discussion, which is an endorsement of what I expect from him for workload perspective.
Now, if the Eagles defense is as bad as your metrics, numberFire's metrics say, what are we doing with the Bucs? So we talked about Rachaad White, but I think it'd be hard to justify Baker outside of the single game slate.
Yeah.
Where are you with Mike Evans, Chris Godwin?
Evans, I think, needs to be an MVP consideration for the single game slate just because, like, we know he can go bananas, and especially against the secondary, I think he can. I don't remember what he did in week 3. 10 targets, 60 yards, and a touchdown. Baker wasn't very good in that game, but there's also the potential for Baker to not be good in this one.
Oh, my God.
I know.
You like Kupp. You like DeMarcus Robinson.
Poop talking my son Baker. Yeah. I said I wasn't going to didn't really want to use Goff. It's all out of sorts. But like Evans, like from an MVP perspective, like you ran the Sims. What are the odds that Evans is the highest scoring guy in the single game slate?
This is without really downgrading Hurts a ton, but it's about 10 to 11% for Evans.
So yeah, consideration. White the better play between the two, but like, I think Evans is up there for sure. I also think Godwin tends to be decent for single game slates because my issue with him is I don't like the upside, but that doesn't matter as much for smaller slates, especially for a single game slate. The yardage has been better recently than it was before. The target totals have been very steady. You can definitely get at the Eagles. So I think that Godwin, both guys make a lot of sense. I don't know if I'll get to either for the full slate just because there are receivers in better game environments who I like more. Like I like Nico. Evans or Nico? Because I think I actually probably should prefer Evans actually.
On the 6-game slate, I could see going Evans there.
I think so. I prefer Puka though.
Yeah.
And Cooper for scrolling down. But and I think when you have Jaden Reed, Jalen Waddle above Godwin in the 6-game slate, I prefer those guys too over Godwin. So like for the 6-game slate, I'm not as high, but like, I just want to be heavy. I want to be above the field on the Bucks for the single game slate because I just don't respect this Philly defense right now.
You don't respect a lot of things, Jim.
I don't respect Matt Patricia. Like, I could say that one. That's fine.
Yeah, it's going to be a little bit of a wait and see approach. For the 6-game slates, though, we got the ability to swap things around, so you can kind of make placeholders and build as if we, as we learn more info for the Eagles and everything. So that's one way to do it. But what's your total for this game?
43.4. So directly in line with market.
Okay.
Where are you? Are you?
45.3.
Okay. Any final thoughts for you on this game or wildcard weekend in general?
There's value if you're able, as we always say, to be different without being dumb. I don't think you need to play Baker Mayfield on the 6-game slate.
Nope.
But you can find ways to get unique, stack teams that might be underdogs, something like that. And I think this is going to be a fun weekend with all these different slates. So many different ways to break things down.
Yeah.
It's going to be a good one.
It is going to be a good one indeed. That is all that we have here for today on the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast. As mentioned, make sure you're subscribed to get our PGA, NBA, and UFC podcasts all in the same place. You can also find the NFL podcast once again next Thursday, 10 a.m. Eastern on the FanDuel YouTube page, and then up on the FanDuel TV Plus app and the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed after the fact. Brandon, if people have questions for you on Twitter, where can they find you there?
I'm on Twitter at Gdula13, GDULA13.
And I'm on Twitter at Jim Sonis. You can find me on Threads at Jim.Sonis. And you can follow FanDuel Research on Twitter at FanDuel Research. Enjoy a fantastic weekend of football, everybody. Good luck to all of you in your contests. We'll talk to you once again next week for the divisional round. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.